Hello, I am Lisa Gardner, CEO of OMS Strategic Advisors and the host of the Uncompromised podcast, where we have an unwavering commitment to values, beliefs, authenticity, integrity, or character that brings heart and care to an organization. I'm bringing you some of the business's brightest, uncompromised executives and thought leaders to discuss challenging corporate norms. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to introduce Garland Fuller, a powerhouse in the commercial real estate realm with over 15 years in HR, DE&I, talent acquisition. As a founding partner of Level Up Inclusion Partners and an adjunct professor at USC Price School, Garland is deeply committed to fostering true inclusion. She's also the host of Full Circle with Garland, a podcast spotlighting diverse leaders passionate about social impact. Serving on boards like AAREP LA and the Real Estate Association of Latino Professionals, her accolades include being named one of the BizNow's Southern California Power Women in 2021. Welcome, Garland.
Thank you so much. Talk about a welcome. I'm like, yes, let's do this.
Well, I can tell you, Kalani was such a blessing to introduce me to you. And the more that I find out about you, you're definitely a voice. Obviously, you know that with having your own podcast, but you're a voice that people need to hear, that this community needs to hear, the industries need to hear, corporate needs to hear. So I am very grateful that you're on the podcast. And I want to go back when we briefly spoke on the phone. I was already impressed with your thought leadership around D&I and some of the discussion we had, but also I want to compliment you for being a wonderful mother.
Oh.
And just how you shared your child with me. And I love when I have guests that truly understand their priorities, and you definitely are one of them.
Thank you.
In spite of your stellar resume and the things that you're doing to impact our communities, you are impacting the number one priority, which is your family. So absolutely. Explain to our listeners what has been the most rewarding, Garland, in pushing diversity, equity, inclusion forward, and what has been most challenging?
Okay, so I'd say the most rewarding, I think for me, it's a lot of pride and representation. So in spaces where you are what they call first only or different, you're the only one, or you look different than everyone else in the room, sometimes it's very hard to feel like you belong or that your voice or what you are bringing to the table matters. And so for me, the most rewarding part of doing this work is having people realize their voice matters, that what they have to say, their perspective, how they see the world is important. And you're sitting at that table, whatever table you're sitting at, you're supposed to be there. Don't ever question your value or, let the imposter syndrome start to creep up on you. The reward for me is when people realize this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
This is why I'm in this spot, in this moment, at this time to do this thing. And so I think when you step into your purpose and you know this is what you're supposed to be doing, and you see that in other people around you, that they are also very clear and recognize that this is what they need to be doing, there's just this spark, this yes, this is what we're supposed to be doing. The challenging part, I think, is understanding that this is a journey and everyone is on their own, is at their own place in this journey. I think when you are actively having to deal with being first only different in your life, you have a certain awareness to what's going on around you. You listen to tone of voice maybe more. You pay attention to eye contact. You look at how other people interact because you're trying to figure out the cues and understand what's happening. Sometimes it's the unspoken, the nonverbal, the implicit things that are said. And so you're sometimes very attuned and very keen in your awareness of what is happening. And there are other people who walk into rooms and that they don't think about any of that. They're not aware of it. They don't have to be aware of it. They are just, we have an agenda, let's get to it. They're chatting about what happened last weekend. They're chatting about this game that they were watching or this golf that they did. And you are like trying to just figure out what's happening as a
Mm-hmm.
person of color
Mm-hmm.
in these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so you, I think, sometimes have to realize everyone's not showing up the way you are, which is why the reward is you have something unique. But the other part
Mm-hmm.
is it's giving grace to everybody because
Mm-hmm.
no one's got it figured out. We
Yes.
all have our biases. We're all walking into things, seeing things a certain way. And so it's giving grace to the people around you to say, I see that that may not be what you understand. That may not be how you were raised. That may not have been your experience. But I need you to, one, believe me, but
Mm-hmm.
two, I also need to understand you're not at the same spot that I am. And
Absolutely.
so we just have to come to some kinds of um, understanding. I think it's a lot of just communication is a big part of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to talk about race, class, gender, LGBTQ status. These are not easy conversations to have when it comes to DE&I,
Mm-hmm.
but it is something that we can't pretend doesn't exist or can't pretend isn't happening. Um, it's happening. It's here, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's in the room. So I think stepping into the conversations and leaning into the uncomfort
Mm-hmm.
is where I have seen a lot of it's a sigh of we all understand now. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know you saw it this way, or I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize this experience
Mm-hmm.
happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
or oh wow, I wasn't aware of XYZ. And so it's a lot of us not being aware of things and just face value
Mm-hmm.
making decisions. So for me, DEI work is really the rewarding part is seeing people come into the fullness of who they are and showing up fully as who they are, unapologetically feeling like I belong.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side, the challenge is realizing everyone's in their different place. And so in order for us to communicate, connect, transact, whatever it is, we need to find those middle grounds and those places of commonality and understanding that help us to see each other as different. And that's okay.
That's right. Let me ask a follow-up question to that. Those that have navigated those spaces well, those people of color who've made it into the C-suite, right? I'm going to sort of talk to those listeners right now. What are some of the things that you think they would have said, some practical ideas that they would have said they have done in order to feel comfortable in spaces that they do not come from, in order to get to where they have gone? I know you
Yeah.
said, first of all, understanding that I belong here, right? I had another executive friend used to tell me that every time he got promoted, he would take ownership. He said, I acted like I owned the division. I owned the company. He says, I've noticed that is something that maybe others do that people of color do not do. They don't take ownership. They follow direction well. They're, trying to get everything done, but do they actually take ownership? So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yes. So I think C-suite, so it's so interesting because the C-suite folks that I know, um, they have some amazing stories because when you are a trailblazer,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really what you're doing, especially in spaces where there is not very many, and your peer group isn't very, there's not tons of
Right. It's not
Black and
very
brown
large.
CEOs.
Exactly. Right.
So
That's right.
you really are then, I think, it's navigating in a space of knowing your strengths and knowing
Mm-hmm.
your areas of development and what are the things
Right.
you need
That's right.
to work on and acknowledging that you
Mm-hmm.
are,
Mm-hmm.
don't know everything and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
it figured it out. But it's
Yes.
also realizing that there's help around you. The help may not look like you though. And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes
Mm.
we are very we're expecting that mentor, that sponsor, or that whatever to be looking like us. And I find there's lots of people who are allies or whatever you want to call them
That's right.
who are willing to work with you if you
That's
first
right.
admit that you need help. And I think a lot of times we don't ask for help because we
Yes.
think we got to be doing it on our own and we got to be strong and
Mm-hmm.
I can't let anybody see that I don't know what I'm doing or I need help. And there's a way, of course, to do that. You don't want to seem like you're unaware, but it's saying, hey, I see that this is an area I need to work on. Do you have any? I see that this is an area you're really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is there an opportunity for us to connect to talk about, how you've developed this, or are there some things that, books I should be reading, a course I should take? You have the ability to change this. When you have a growth mindset, you understand that everything can be learned.
That's right.
Everything can be learned. You can figure it out. It may require you, again, to get uncomfortable, to realize this isn't easy for me. And so I will have to stretch myself. I'll have to push myself. I'll have to try something new. So I'm going to use a simple example like golf. At a certain level, golf becomes a thing. Whether you want to do it or not, if you see it like learning a language, say you have to run a division in Latin America and you need some basic conversational Spanish in order to feel like you're connecting with your colleagues there. So say you do a little, some Spanish coursework so that you can learn a little Spanish so that you can be effective with that group. That's one way of doing it. But golf is a thing. Does it mean you need to be the next Tiger Woods?
No.
But it means when you're out on that golf course, you know how to hold the club, you know which club to pick, you understand how you need to swing in order to get it a certain distance. And if you need to take a few clinics or do this with a friend, I know a lot of folks get together with their friends to learn golf. So you don't even have to learn with this group of people. You can learn it just to say, next time I go to the golf club with all of these folks, I want to feel like I can do this. And even if I'm not, haven't been doing it since I was 9 years old, it's okay. I can still figure it out and learn how to do it. So I find that sometimes what gets you there doesn't help you to keep raising. You still have to raise your bar as you keep going up.
That's right.
What gets you to the VP level, the SVP level, you still have to be growing. You still have to stretch yourself. And so I think sometimes it's hard when you're at a certain level, you think, oh, I made it, like I got it. But that doesn't mean there isn't still opportunity and room to grow, and there aren't things that you can learn. And so, I mean, I use that as like a basic example, but that could be in anything. If you find that you need more assistance in looking at finances in a certain way, or looking at marketing in a certain way, if it's a business skill, the thing is, we do this with business skills all the time. But sometimes we're like, I don't feel comfortable in that space, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, well, honestly, if you want to be effective and you want to keep raising the bar, you're going to have to learn how to do it. Doesn't mean you need to be Nobel Prize winning Olympic level, but it means you need to throw yourself into it and make it something that can be enjoyable and is interesting to you.
You know what, Garland, I'm going to stop you right there because I want to talk to the C-suite executive who's already in the C-suite, who's a person of color already in the C-suite, right? And those that aren't a person of color as well. Again, I'm trying to merge the two here. Let me ask you this. Here's an example. We had a friend who, again, is in the C-suite, who said that even in the C-suite, she felt alone. And here's why. Those that are in the C-suite, sort of, her being the only person of color, they had just almost like a club where they knew what to invest in because of the level of their compensation. They had investments that the market didn't know about. They knew where to go to, and they weren't including her in that kind of conversation, even at the C-suite level, right?
Yeah.
So how do you suggest that a person who is at the C-suite level, a person of color, and we're talking to the people who are not of color as well, how do we bring inclusion even at those top levels?
Yeah. I think oftentimes, again, we don't ask for help. So if you know these conversations are happening, it's sometimes, I mean, the same way if there was a meeting going on that you knew was going on and you weren't invited to that meeting, hey, I understand that we're all doing a variety of things with our additional compensation that we have. I'd love to, next time you guys have a meeting, I'd love to join. Or, I've got some ideas too, but I wasn't sure about them. And so I would love to, connect with you all to find out a little bit more about what you're doing. please include me in that next meeting. And it's really asking.
It's just asking. It's being assertive enough to ask. Exactly.
It's asking.
That's
And
right.
for our allies and the folks who, may be unaware that they're
right.
Someone out.
That's right.
Think about why you're leaving them out. I mean, is it because you don't think they'll be interested? Is it because you don't know that, it's something they want? Don't make that decision for other people. I feel like you have the opportunity to show your leadership. So when I talk to a lot of executives, specifically white male executives, and they ask about what they can be doing, and I'm always telling them, because people watch you, because people look at you, how you talk to other people, who you invite to lunch, who you invite to the ball game, all of that, people are watching you more than you probably realize people are watching you because of the title that you have and the responsibility and the authority that you have in this organization. And so your actions are speaking way louder than anything you're saying. You can say whatever you want on the in the boardroom, but how you treat people and what you're doing with them and how you are talking to them and who you engage and who you pull aside and say great job after they do something, that sets the culture of the organization and sets how people realize I need to behave.
Yes.
And so if you're, as a leader, making snide comments and making off-color jokes, you're setting the example that it's okay to do that. So when you have bad actors in your organization and you wonder why, look at yourself. Because oftentimes I find that the leaders who have strong character, integrity, honesty, who are self-reflective, who know they don't have all the answers, and who are open to being coached and have a growth mindset and understand that they too need to learn, those are the leaders people love. Absolutely. Because they realize they are not thinking they're above anyone else or that they're better than us. They're in it with us. They're trying to help. They want to be involved. And so I always encourage leaders, your behavior and how you interact with everyone speaks more for your leadership than sometimes any boardroom presentation that you give, because it's the small moments, it's the holding the elevator for someone, it's the, oh, I'm going downstairs too, can I sit with you?
Very good.
Those are the things that people are like, wow, this person is like engaged. They can, and I'm not saying you do this all every day, but when you have those free moments, how are you connecting with people outside of just the work, what I call the work that we're all doing?
Absolutely.
And those are the moments. And so if you see someone that's not included, if you say, oh, hey, won't you come and sit with us? Or if you saw a woman at the table who was trying to get a point across and raised her hand, but for whatever reasons got talked over. Hey, I saw that Deborah had a point. Can we hear what you have to say? Oh, I saw that Linda here, mentioned something very similar. Linda, would you like to talk about that more? What people stop doing? Talking over women.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another example that came to my mind. I would love you to address this too, Garland. My husband had this example as well, who he was sitting at a board meeting. And I just heard this example from another board member just about a week ago. But there was an idea that came about. And the solution, actually, there was a problem that came about. And the solution to the idea, my husband spoke the solution. Here he's in this board meeting. Somehow it gets glossed over, but maybe 15, 20 minutes later, actually it was another guest I had on the podcast, Tamala Thornton, and I think you'll enjoy her podcast. But 15, 20 minutes later, the same idea was actually given by another board member. And that idea or solution was brought to the table like, very good, we haven't thought of that. And I'm finding that there are executives, women as well as people of color, that often experience that kind of, I don't know what you want to call it. It's
selective attention, right?
Selective attention. And sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's not, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But again, it boils down to paying attention, what you were just saying. And I found that interesting that one of my podcast guests, Tamala, said the same example as something that my husband experienced years ago on a board as well. And anyway, I think that you addressed that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens. Sometimes it's subconsciously or unconsciously. And this is why I always encourage, look at the dynamics of a room. And I think at a certain level, that's like a natural norm that you do, that you maybe just scan the room and already know, who's sitting to the right or the left of the person who's the head, the chairman, or whoever, who is, who's taking notes, who's supposed to be doing this, who's doing that. And I always encourage women as well as people of color, don't be the note taker. Either that's something that gets rotated around, or we bring someone in who that is their job, is to sit there and take notes. Because if you're taking notes, it's very hard to contribute to the conversation because you're trying to make sure you're scribing all the things down. And so, and it's honestly sometimes seen as a service role, right? Oh, you're taking our notes for us.
Yes.
And so you're seen then as, oh, this person's here to take notes. So that means they're not going to give good ideas, or whatever good ideas they give, maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't. They're note taking. And so don't take notes. Don't be the note taker. Don't volunteer to do that. Yeah. Well, who's taking notes? I don't know. I don't know, but it's not going to be me. You don't have to say that, but it's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe so-and-so wants to take notes. Or maybe we should bring someone who we trust in to take notes so that we can all be valuable contributors to this meeting. Because it's very hard sometimes to shed a role or a, image that people may have of you. And so that comment you made earlier about someone who says, I act like I own it. I act like I'm, it's mine and I lead in that way. And that is a part of it, is, certain things I will not do, because if I am trying to make sure that you see me in a certain way, I need to show up a certain way. And so I'm not going to do note taking, because I want you to see me as someone who is able to, come up with an idea, figure out how to execute it, follow up and coordinate with whatever in order to bring it to fruition. And if you have relationships and you are someone who knows a lot of people, that might be your thing, is actually, I know 3 people who can do this.
Absolutely. And it's not that we're not trying to be a helpful team member, but when you know that there may be a challenge around the table, being the only woman, being the only person of color, or maybe one of 2, that we need to focus and be intentional on making sure they understand that we are solution providers, and that we truly can bring something to the table that is substantial, that will help us move forward. And I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that we have to be sensitive to that, to understand why we would not choose to be the note taker, why we would not choose a different assignment, right? Because we have to work harder at being seen in that light as of right now, where we are right.
Correct.
I think you're absolutely right. My next question is this, and I want to talk about change management within an organization, and as it pertains to talent acquisition. For the leadership of corporate entities, small, medium, and large, what would be the most effective strategies you have seen implemented with success when it comes to change management, especially when you're talking about talent acquisition? Because I'm assuming a lot of change has been in organizational structures, how they look. Making sure that they look like the marketplace they serve. So what have you seen, or what have you seen implemented that is of success, and what have you seen the challenges around that?
So change management is, it's really around where are you trying to go, and what does your current population look like in order to be able to be successful in that change. Sometimes it's skill development. People need to upskill and learn some new things in order to be able to take you to that next level. Sometimes it's it's not sometimes only talent acquisition, it's also just looking at our talent and seeing what their strengths are and being able to understand what's transferable as a skill set. I think sometimes when we put people in a role with a title, with a particular department and a particular thing that they do, we think this is all they can do. And we don't really know anything about what else they can do. And we oftentimes sometimes don't ask, you know, what people are doing Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 while they're sitting in the role that you have them sitting in is one thing. You don't know what they're doing at night. You don't know what they're doing on weekends. You don't know what side hustle they had in college. You don't know what their partner does for a living. You don't know if they're involved in their kid's school in a certain capacity, if they're on a board for an external organization. People are building skills in a variety of places other than 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
I would agree.
And so I think we often shortchange because we're in the information age. I tell this to everyone, which means, if anything, it's distilling the information and finding what's relevant. But there's information all around us. And our ability to learn now is, I think, the most it's ever been in human history. Literally at your fingertips.
Absolutely. Which allows that part of growth mindset to be a lot easier, right?
Yes.
That's a huge part of growth mind, right? So
you have the ability to learn something.
Absolutely.
Very much about how motivated are you to learn it. And at this point, it's on you to figure out that skill set. And we learn much faster than I think we give ourselves credit for. Now, are we at the 10,000 hour expert level? No. But are we able to figure out how to do something in order to execute something and deliver it? Yes. Now, if we need to do this at, again, a scalable, repeatable, all the time level, maybe not. But if you need someone to learn how to do something in order to fix something and figure it out, they can figure it out, especially this next generation. So I'm going to speak specifically to, the change management. It's around upskilling folks and understanding that we have different generations in the workplace right now.
That's
and there's different mindsets with different generations. And the generation that's coming up, and I say this because I'm a professor and I work with this level very often, they don't think there's anything they can't learn. If anything, they're sometimes overconfident that they can learn it as quickly and be at expert level. But there's nothing that generation cannot learn. And
I have one of those, yes.
And they don't like feeling like you're underestimating them.
That's right.
Give them the chance.
That's right. Yes. And I love that about them. I actually really do love that about them.
I love it. I love it as well.
I think it's needed where they are right now and what's going on. It's needed that they have that mindset, but go ahead. Yes.
And so it's very difficult, I think, when we come from a generation, an older generation, and I'm X, I'm kind of in between millennial and boomer, where you think things need to be done a certain way, in a certain order. They need to be doing it for a certain amount of time. You need a certain amount of tenure. All of these rules that we have created around expertise, around what it means to do something well, those are not rules that exist for this generation. They are like, I can learn how to make a movie. I can learn how to create a presentation that animates and does this and does that. I can learn how to, jump in the stock market and start, building a portfolio. Yes. And by the end of the year, have $10,000 and they started with 10. That is the generation that we're working with. And so when they hear you can't do it yet because you are not XYZ enough, it drives them bonkers. And so I am not saying let them run wild. I am saying temper that with check-ins, temper that with, let's start you here. Let's do that. Let's consider this. Check in with me. So-and-so has done this before. Sit and shadow and train with them. You need to start to not put restrictions on things and leave some space for failure. Because I think in corporate environments, failure is like, it's the worst. Oh my God. And I
Right.
think what tech has shown us as an industry is that is how tech works. It will fail. They expect it to fail. Their thing is to fail
Yes.
fast and move on.
Mhm.
We don't hang it over anyone's head if something doesn't work. We tried it. At least we know, check, we tried it. Let's move on to the next opportunity to try it. And
That's
so
right.
they very much use a scientific method to get things done. And we, I think, have lost the scientific method of let's put a hypothesis to test and see whether it
See what
flies.
happens. Absolutely.
Um,
It's through the failure that we learn and grow. It's not through the successes.
correct. And I think sometimes we
So,
get when it comes to change, we're expecting it to
yes.
change quickly and perfectly and
And be
seamlessly.
perfectly right.
And it doesn't work like that. So
Mhm.
one spring I decided to grow a butterfly, go from an egg
Mhm.
to a butterfly. I haven't seen this process, of course, since I was in elementary school, because that's where they do it the
Mhm.
most.
Mhm.
And so the time that I did that, I learned so much, because when you see the different stages, that it starts out as an egg, it starts out as a small caterpillar, it becomes this big, fat, juicy caterpillar, and then you see it go into the chrysalis, and then you see it turn into this butterfly. And
Mhm.
you realize when it comes to change and metamorphosis, it isn't always pretty.
Mm. So
It
good.
takes it takes time,
That's
doesn't
right.
happen overnight. And with the butterfly specifically, you cannot help it out of the chrysalis. It needs to fight its way out, and it needs to flap its wings and dry itself in order for it to be complete. You cannot do
Yes.
the change for anyone else.
That's right. That's
They have to go through the change.
have to
And
go there.
and
Yes.
it's hard to watch sometimes when you know what to do and you could just come in and fix it. But
That's right.
sometimes this is how people learn,
Mhm.
and this is how you end up becoming a better whatever it is that you're doing.
Now
And
you're giving parenting advice too. The most difficult thing is to watch your kid knowing that they're about to take one step into failure, but you know it's necessary so they will remember. Yes.
and
So,
so it's
yes.
it's 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 change is just
Yes.
it's being okay with things not being great all the time and
Right.
being uncomfortable, and sometimes things look a little chaotic, but then it comes together.
It does come together. That's right. Going back to, and I think this is where it's important. You touched on this at the beginning of this time together. You said, have mentors that don't look like you.
Yes.
And I think when you do that, then I believe that your freedom that you're talking about that's needed for them to grow is a little easier to take those steps.
Yes.
Always have a mentor
Always.
and have a mentor where you are aspiring to go, right?
Yes.
Um, even within the C-suite, and again, I want to talk to every audience here, Garland, but even with C-suite executives, having a mentor is still important for them, right? And they always
Correct.
and a lot of them speak to that, right? But that gives you the freedom that you are needing to take that risk, to do something that hasn't been done before, and know that you have the backing and the support to know that if it fails or if it's not quite perfect, it's okay.
Yeah.
Take it again. And then for people in that organization too, to understand that you have that kind of support from these particular mentors or mentor is also, I think, very important. So I'll let you touch on that a little bit.
So sponsorship is what you were talking about.
And there you go. Thank you,
So
sponsor.
sponsorship is when I call it people are wearing your t-shirt. They are
Yes.
supporters of you. They love you. They
Mhm.
think you are
That's
great. They
right.
speak your name in rooms that you're not in.
And yes,
And
yes.
they are, if anything, helping you be visible
Mhm.
within organization where you may not be in those rooms that they're in, but they're in those rooms and they're speaking your name and
Mhm.
giving you the praise and giving you the kudos that maybe someone else who hasn't worked with you doesn't even know
That's
anything
right.
about you and your abilities. And so the mentorship part I think is important because we all have goals.
Mm-hmm.
We all have things we want to do, even at the C-suite. What
Mm-hmm.
do you do after X amount of years within the role? Are you looking for a different industry? You're looking for a bigger org, or you want to be on corporate boards and start to do corporate board work?
Yes.
That's a whole thing. Or do you want to, become a speaker or
Yes.
write a book? There's lots of things you can keep doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never done this before, you don't know the first thing about any of those areas, having someone who's done it and they can tell you, let me connect you with the speaking agency that I work with, or let me tell you about what the process was like to write this book.
That's
Or you know what? I sit on 3 boards and let me tell you how I got on the first one. And here are
that's
the
right.
questions and the things that you should be looking at and asking. And here's an agency that this is what they do is,
Mm-hmm.
helping people find. So there's even in that realm, there's
That's right.
something to learn.
Absolutely.
Um, and so if you understand that there's still uncharted waters that you haven't, crossed yet, but guess what? There's someone who's already been out there who
Mhm.
knows exactly how it can work and can help you, then ask for that help. And as I said, it may not look like you. But I think there still needs to be a connection. And I speak a lot about connection because I find that people have more in common than they sometimes realize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when if family is something that's important to you, if giving back in community service is something that's important to you, if you have a specific idea that you would like to see to come to fruition, and someone who's done something very similar, all of these are places that you can make connections with someone, because family is important to a lot of people.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
why wouldn't you have somebody who they are very much involved in going to activities and doing things and out with their family, and so they can relate to that because they're doing the same thing with their family.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Very good point, Garland. Let me switch gears for a minute here. Um, as a woman of color, Garland, what are you wanting to communicate to your peers, right? Which would be the executives, the leadership out there in the industry, all industries. And as an adjunct professor, what message are you leaving with your
Mm.
students as a woman of color?
Ah, well, it's interesting because when I was asked to be a professor,
Mhm.
I said yes because I didn't see many of me's when I was going through school either.
Mhm.
Um, I had a few, but it wasn't a lot. Um, and I wanted to, one, have someone, students that I see understand that representation matters. So the students that I do have, specifically in real estate, there's always maybe about 5 or 6 women in my class. And they're literally a little cluster almost near the back or the middle of the room.
Mhm.
And they usually don't speak up if I don't call on them,
Right.
which I think is just the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, it's basically me letting them know, one, you can see it, you can do it.
Mhm.
And I usually, when I
Mhm.
introduce myself to the class in the beginning, I say, I'm here for everyone, but I'm here for the women. I need you to see that I'm here to make sure that you aren't falling to the back, or
Mm.
or quieting yourself. Uh,
Yes.
and like, your voice is relevant in this room, even though there's 5 of you in a group of 25 or 30,
Mhm.
you still have a voice here. And so they sometimes they come off to the side at the end of class to meet me or office hours and tell me what's going on. And it's a different conversation than when the guys come and talk to me. But it's important for them to realize there's a space in this industry for them, and there's a space in corporation, in the corporate world for them. I'd say, with, like, as a woman of color, what I'm telling people now is, you need to speak up. You need to show up. And I say this because people think, oh, well, I'm the only whatever in the room. And I'm like, we already know you're the only whatever. Unless you are blind,
That's right.
everyone can see you.
Mhm.
Everyone sees you. And what they don't see is who you are.
That's right.
And so be able to show up as yourself. Talk about your weekend. Talk about where you went on vacation. Share that foster a dog or a cat. Tell them that you volunteered at a particular organization, like that you go to church on Sunday. Don't dim your light
That's
to
right.
make other people comfortable. One, because it's not true, it's not authentic. And two, what you do in your life is just as important as what everyone else is doing in theirs.
I would go one step further. It's almost become an obligation for you to share and not dim your light, because that allows them to get to know who you are, right?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
allows them to become more comfortable with the next person that they meet, who may look like you or may have, have the same lifestyle as you. So I almost feel like it's an obligation at this point. That's the piece that we have to give. We have to speak up, and we have to make sure that we are heard in a room.
Yes.
And it's funny that you say that. It touched my heart when you said that, because I haven't always been there, Garland. That has been a struggle, of mine for a while.
Yes.
And sure, giving a presentation, a planned presentation, being able to speak about whatever I needed to do with this client or close a deal, sure. But to actually hear my voice and to lift my voice and know that my voice brings a power to the room. It brings a unity to the room, actually.
Yes.
It brings healing to a room. That is the piece. So anyway, very good. Go ahead.
Yes. And I can say that in my early stages of my career, I didn't used to say anything.
Yes.
I didn't used to put up a photo.
That's me too.
I didn't used to, tell you about my weekends.
That's right.
Because I was like, well, one, you may not even understand what
And right.
and two, I don't know, do you really care?
Mhm.
But that's not my decision to make.
To
Like,
judge. Right. Right.
I cannot discern how you are going to interpret my answer or why you are asking. That's way too much psychological conversations.
Mhm.
What we need to do is just say, yeah, I went to the Maxwell concert at the Hollywood Bowl on Sunday. It
was great.
I haven't seen him in over 20 years. He was, for me, I love his music because XYZ. It takes me back to this time in my life when I was, becoming an adult. And
Mhm.
so there's a nostalgia of my early adulthood. And so his
Mhm.
music, I just enjoy his music.
Yes.
And so why can't you share your joy? Why can't you share your things that you like?
That's right.
They may not know who that artist is, but that person is important to you, and that's something you can share. Or
Absolutely.
I went to go and see a play with my daughter. She loves the theater. She's interested in theater. Why shouldn't I share that? And so I think we sometimes hold who we are close to our vest
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
we either don't feel safe or want to be vulnerable like that. But I
Mhm.
think in that, as you were saying, the connection, you lose the opportunity to have a connection with someone else,
Mhm.
because how do
Mhm.
you know that they're thinking, oh, I didn't even know you liked this. I like it too. Or, oh, I know so and so, she likes this too. Maybe you guys should go see a show together, whatever it is.
That's right.
And so you miss that opportunity for those connections to be made by holding it close to your vest.
That's
Um,
right.
and so I just want us to be more fully ourselves, because we have very rich lives. I think a part of why a lot of this discord and just distrust comes from the fact that we have been hiding parts of ourselves um, for whatever reasons. And I think there was a time in this country when that's what you had to do to survive. That's
Yeah.
what you had to do in order to be safe. But I think
Yes.
we're in a time now where we need to show up. We need to say, this is who I am. This is what I like to do. This is
Right.
what makes me feel full and joyful and whole. And I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well, you remind me, I always like to have very, I call them direct and honest conversations with the parents that I have been going to, my kids been going to school with since first grade. And I love to share with them what I have to do with my African American son, which is one step further than just staying in the community that he's in. I like to share the fact that he's in an organization of other African American children where they learn more about their heritage and who they are and how they are placed in this world, right? I love sharing the fact that our family, we do things this way culturally. Yes, church, you talked about church. We talked about, our families, and, what we had, Christmas dinner. And I blatantly share that, not to bring shock to the room, but usually I share it when I'm the only one in the room that looks like me. And I do it in hopes that they will begin to put that in their vocabulary. And I have noticed with some of my closer friends, my allies of the other persuasion, that they have a little bit of the children's organization that I'm talking about in their vocabulary now. They understand when I say the name of that children's organization. They're like, oh, he has that. Okay, I see. So then it becomes familiar to them. And so the next person they meet, they're going to like, oh, I know what that is, my friendlies. So you're absolutely right. And that is what we even have to do within, feeling comfortable to do that even within a corporate setting. Like you said, we were taught to hide our lifestyle, but we need to strategically open up our lifestyle so that others can feel a connection and possibly even feel a vulnerability from us, because that's what builds a relationship, right? So
Correct.
Yeah, that is so good.
It's so important. I think we're moving towards whole self presentation. We're not doing this compartmentalization of when I'm at work, I'm like this.
Right.
I have to show up like this and I have to do this.
Yes.
And when I'm at home, I take off that mask or take off that identity, that coat, that whatever. And then I pick up this one. It's like bringing me back to Mr. Rogers. When he comes home, takes off his blazer, he puts on his sweater, he changes his shoes. And so I think we do a lot of that. And we've been doing it for a very long time. And I think the pandemic was where we couldn't do that anymore. Because your work and your home were the same place. And you didn't know who had a dog at home until pandemic.
And right. And you ended up sharing, you had to share, which I never thought about that, Garland. That's so true.
And you realized who has a newborn and who has a this, who has a bird and who has a whatever. Everything was out there. And we had to adjust very quickly.
Yep. You actually really learned the names of the family members, the spouses and the children, and when one was sick, or you really did. And those are one of the things that came out of the pandemic that there was a lot of heartache, and I don't want to take away from that. There was a lot of pain during the pandemic, but where there's pain, also there's something else that's birthed out of it. And I think that's one thing that I did not think about, but you're absolutely right.
And so now that we know that we all have personal lives.
That's right. But you know what? One thing that I've noticed with the generations of Gen Z, Gen Xers, millennials, you've touched a little bit on them, is that I heard one particular friend of mine, she's the editor of a magazine here in Dallas. She said, it's called blending. Everyone she works around is within that generation, right? And she says they want a blending work environment. Everything is blended together. So on their calendar, you'll see a mixture of everything, so everyone can see it, right? And they're not afraid to share what that blending looks like, right? Versus when I was coming up, I was taught to keep all that separate, like you said before. So
yes. And I think the blending is how people are making their work life. I don't even want to call it balance. It's integration. Work-life integration. Because
very good.
You're still, a mom, you're still a wife, you're still a parent.
Yes.
Whatever, when you're at work.
Yes.
If your child calls and says they don't feel well, or the school calls and says they don't feel well, you now have to figure that out. If, something happens at home, and a pipe bursts, or like you have to go home and figure, you know what I mean? So we
Yes.
can't, again, compartmentalize all the things that are happening, and things are happening so quickly. We do have the ability to respond more quickly now than we ever have. So you're constantly having to respond to things. And so it doesn't even give you the opportunity to pretend to put on the hats, because
Yes.
you can't do it in a way that makes sense. It's not authentic. It's not realistic. And so I feel as though this place that we're moving towards, of blending, of seeing people as whole, you've got multiple things going on with you and will need different things. I mean, it's important. And it's easier for me to tell you what's happening to me and you understand and feel empathetic and compassionate
Yes.
than for me to pretend like it's not happening or having to tell you something else. Uh,
Yes.
and then mentally, I'm holding all of this in my mind. We're all still late, we're emotionally carrying things all the time.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's showing up in how we work.
Yes.
And so it's easier for me to tell you, I've been doing some elder caregiving with my aunt, and we just moved her from one nursing facility to the next, and it's been a
Mhm.
transition. And
Mhm.
because I'm the, person in the family that's designated to
Mhm.
participate in making sure this process goes seamlessly, I've
Mhm.
had to think about that more, and I've had to go to the nursing home more, and I've had
Mhm.
to interact with the staff. And
Mhm.
so it's easier for me to work at home this week because I've got all that stuff going on.
Right.
You tell someone that, they're like, oh, okay, I understand. Either one, because I've been through it, or two, because that sounds like a lot.
Yes, exactly. But they have to always understand this, and I want to make it very clear. That doesn't mean that your work is less productive. It doesn't mean that you're not getting more done. It doesn't mean, in fact, the fact that you're able to integrate, I love the word integrate, your work life like that, you actually are more productive on the work side because you're not so concerned about what's happening, because you're able to integrate it and work it through. And that is something that I truly, at the tables of clients, even within our own company, when we customize teams, I think that is paramount, that they feel comfortable, that the work integration is a priority, because I know that I'm going to get better work. I don't know if it's in Japan or where it is. I don't remember, but there was a culture that made sure that they had work integration with their employees. And this is many years ago. They've been doing it. And I think now we're just now catching on. And maybe the pandemic accelerated that a little bit, but we're catching on that you have a more efficient and a better person at work when they're able to understand that the integration of their life is important to who they work for as well. I just believe that.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
We're not robots.
No, we are not.
We are not,
Mhm.
yet at a place where we are AI ourselves. No, I
That's
mean,
right.
we need to still manage all that is happening. And I think the
Mhm.
organizations that are, I think, aware of the
Mhm.
fact that we can't just push forward without having some conversation with people to
Mhm.
understand, what do you need to be, like you said, productive? What
Mhm.
do you need in order to be successful?
That's
Um,
right.
how does this need to work in order for this to work, not just for you, but for your team?
Mhm.
Um, and if anything, we learned in pandemic, at least I can say this, people were working more.
And working later through the night, taking break. The companies actually got more hours out of that employee. Now, I will have to say there are some business owners that I've talked to. This is no, I've got to bring them back in. And so you're seeing a hybrid of them coming back in, but also there's more of a freedom and there's more of an ease within the workplace that, hey, it's okay that that person works at home today, or if they
Yes.
would choose to work at home 2 to 3 times, 2 to 3 days out of the week. But yes, you actually get more, because how many times did we go back at 8 o'clock, 8:30 after, and go ahead and work even further into the night? Not unhealthy, because we were
No,
able to take care of the family business as well. We still were able to make it priority. So, oh, that's such a good point. Such a good point.
And we saw the biggest drop off of women. It was like a throwback to the 60s in terms of just women in the workplace, because women are still very much the primary caregiving person in the household.
Yes,
and
they
so
are.
some women had to make hard decisions on, okay, between work and my family, where am I going to focus my energy and my attention, because many of the schools were closed here. I can speak for California. We had a very, I think our shutdown and our lockdown was tight, and they kept kids out of school for a very long time. Right. And so you have children at home that now need to be on Zoom school, or you need to, try to make sure they're all, especially if you had multiple kids. There's a lot happening. And so it's very difficult. It was very difficult for a lot of women. And I think if we have, especially women now making up such a large percentage of, our workforce, women coming out of college at rates exceeding men in some places, women are the future of work. And so if you are intending to have women in your workplace, you need to understand work-life integration. You need to understand flex and hybrid scheduling. And you need to understand that it's not going to look the way it did in 1965. It's not going to look the way it did in 2000. And so it doesn't mean women don't care. It doesn't mean women need special accommodations. What it means is, if you intend to have this population in your workforce, you need to be open to doing things differently.
Absolutely. I think that is finely stated. Absolutely. Here's my last question, and I'm going to let you go. What corporate entities are doing a great job, Garland, in creating healthy organizational structures that include a strong, diverse workforce and who understand how to create environments of inclusivity? Maybe you can't name the companies, but maybe you can name some. Yes. So, who's doing a great job out there? Let's say we have a listener who's like, well, I want to know who's doing a great job. Who can I what can I look to?
I feel like they're all in flux right now because of this impending recession. And a lot of organizations have had to do some, layoffs and some reorging and things like that. I think and this one, I know they're working at it because I know people inside the organization, and they do a different way of thinking about it. So Netflix, and I don't, they're not paying me. I've never worked there.
That's right. Never worked there. Right.
I don't know them like that.
Don't know them. That's right. Let's make that clear. Right.
But in terms of, I'd say how they have their own culture document that's very clear in terms of how they work and what they're expecting from people. I know I think they don't call it DE&I, they have a different term, but that group is a group that's very much looking at what it is that they need to do. Because it's a global company, they have to understand the nuances of different parts of the world in order to put out the product of entertainment that they do. They have, a Europe division, an Asia Pacific division, a US division, a Latin America. And so I think when you have to have your pulse on what people find impactful, engaging, interesting, they have, I think, a very good understanding of where things are and how people are. And I think they've adopted that into their work culture to the degree that they are able to, figure things out. In terms of, I'd say the more, I guess, traditional, older, more organization, I feel like, and I couldn't believe I'd be saying this, Goldman Sachs, because of a lot of the
initiatives they've come out with as well.
Yes.
But yes.
Exactly. And I think that kind of blew my mind when I started to see them put their money where their mouth is, because a lot of organizations say, we're doing this or we're going to do that. But I think putting their money where their mouth is as an organization and making inroads, specifically when it comes to taking, they do a lot with small businesses. They do a lot with women-owned businesses. They make an effort to, I see a lot of Black and brown executives at a certain level, which is not easy to see. They just seem like, and their CEO seems very much like, I'm trying to do better. I know that this is something we need to work on. And so that organization for me is always like, wow, so it's possible. It is possible.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned Goldman Sachs, because I think that if they're able to do it, so many others should be able to do it. When you understand the history and look at the history of Goldman Sachs and where it is today, it's absolutely, it's amazing. It's definitely a gold star. So I would agree with you on that. Yes. Goldman Sachs isn't paying us to say this. We're just giving our opinion.
This is not an active endorsement.
This is not an active endorsement, just observation from just being in the industries and being in the field of work that you do and that I do. So, well, I want to say thank you for your time, Garland. And I'm hoping to get to Los Angeles before the end of the year. So you're definitely on a list for me to look up and see and hopefully break bread with. So
yes, I look forward to meeting you in person. I feel like it's going to be like a reunion, even though we have never met, right?
It is. And it's so funny. I feel like the podcast went like our first phone call. I mean, it was just sort of a natural flow here. So
yes, thank you so much.